Images are oftentimes seen as gateways into the soul. They can represent our triumphs, grief, or even our death. Image creepypastas have been pretty popular since the genre started, and some images have even outlived their creepypastas. Hello everyone and welcome to a new Creepypasta Iceberg. This time we'll be looking at the image creepypasta genre. Not only that, but I'll also be including some video-based creepypastas, famous cursed images from around the internet, and some image-based urban legends. Including an image with your creepypasta is likely a way to make it more interesting and creepy. It works really well if you have multiple forms of media, which is something I've touched on before. With that said, let's get this iceberg started. This is the Cursed Image Creepypasta Iceberg Explained Part 1. Hope you all enjoy. Starting off this iceberg with probably the most famous or infamous image creepypasta, here we have smiledog.jpg. This creepypasta has been making the rounds on the internet since 2008. It was first said to have appeared on 4chan before spreading to the rest of the internet. The true origin of the creepypasta is still not known. The image itself also has no known source. This is something that makes this creepypasta stand out a lot more. We'll talk about that more after the story though. In the summer of 2007, a student, an amateur writer, was trying to conduct an interview with a woman by the name of Mary E. The narrator was looking for something that had been an urban legend he'd heard about many times as a child. According to the narrator, Mary was one of the few people that had first-hand experience with this legend. When the narrator arrived at the residence, Mary refused to leave her room for the interview. Her husband of 15 years tried to comfort her through the door for half an hour before the narrator decided to cut his losses. He did take notes though while listening to her through the door, but most of what he got revolved around incoherent dreams and ramblings. The narrator then explains that in 2005 was the first time he'd heard of smiledog.jpg. It was an internet urban legend, and one that he was very interested in. The rumor of the urban legend always pointed to Mary as the survivor of something called smiledog.jpg. Those rumors aside, there wasn't much evidence of its existence at all. Not online, not on forums, and nowhere you could reasonably expect to find that kind of stuff. The urban legend centered on this picture of a husky in a dimly lit room that appeared to have sharp human-like teeth. It is said that all 400 people, Mary included, that saw the photo originally suffered from nightmares and epileptic seizures. Though there were some photos being spread around 4chan at this time, those were determined not to be the original photo. The most prolific legend around smiledog is that it was actually spread through a chain letter with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." This was a common occurrence for the time, and many didn't really know what chain letters even were. Later the narrator would receive an email from Mary with an apology and some words of advice. She apologized for not talking to him, but also said that she was glad she didn't. She explained that ever since she saw smiledog, she would see him in her nightmares. Every night when she did, he would ask her to spread the word. Mary was unsure why it wanted the word spread, or if it would help her in any way if she did. The assumption was that if she spread, it would leave her be. She was even sent a floppy disk with a package with no return address, which she assumed held the photo. Of course she was ready to pass the burden on to the narrator, but backed out at the last minute. She leaves the email with one final warning to not ask others for the image, as they probably won't be as considerate as she is. A month after this email, the narrator was contacted by the husband to say that his wife had taken her own life. He had found that email she sent him and continued with the warnings that she had given. The narrator later verified that she had indeed passed, but didn't mention how. After some time had passed, the narrator would receive an email from someone he didn't know. The email read, "Hello, I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you were interested in smiledog. I have saw it. It is not bad, as everyone says it is. I have sent it to you here, just spreading the word." The narrator pondered whether to even open the file attached to the email. Was it the real smile.jpg? And what if Mary's warnings were true? Would that mean that he would be tormented every night until he spread the word? Would that even work? Would he even be able to spread the word? Yes, he could, and he attached it to the bottom of the creepypasta. This is the original creepypasta that came with the story of smiledog.jpg. In this story, it's referred to as smile.jpg, but of course the creepy image of the husky is the entity that haunts people. This is probably one of my favorite creepypastas, actually. It was created in 2008 and predates many of the classic era creepypastas, but is by far one of the best. It really shows how good this medium can be for creative horror stories. The story has no author attached, and that anonymous author is what gives it so much intrigue. The image itself also doesn't have a traceable source, which makes it a true mystery. Not only does that add to the story, it also makes it a true urban legend in that case. Many have tried to find the source for the image, but no one has just yet, leaving this as one of the many early internet urban legends. Also, the image isn't alone. It is also said to have an image that can change depending on the viewer. This image is probably one of the most iconic images on the entire internet. This is the original image used for Jeff the Killer, a pretty subpar creepypasta that I won't go into full detail about here, as he's going to be on a different iceberg. I would be remiss for not including it here though, as the image itself has become an internet urban legend. This image even today sends a shiver down my spine. Something about it just digs deep into my subconscious and sets off my fight or flight. I even remember when I first saw this image. That's how much it stuck with me. It was a late night of gaming, and I was just finishing a match of League of Legends with my friends, when I decided it was time for bed. It was either midnight or 1 AM, and I wanted to watch some YouTube before going to sleep. At this time I was just starting to find out about the world of creepypastas, and up to this point I'd only been reading the gaming themed ones. I started YouTube on my Xbox 360 and clicked on the first Mr. Creepypasta video that I saw. The next thing I know, this image is on my screen, and I'm listening to the original Jeff the Killer creepypasta. I actually really liked the creepypasta, but I had to stop the video as the image actually scared me. I could blame being tired or that it was just perfect setting for it to creep me out, but I think the image just does that by itself. Now for the origin of the image, well, that's still something people aren't sure about. The origin of the image has had many leads over the years that have died along the way. The biggest is probably the story of a girl that asked if she was pretty on a 4chan board. The girl's name was Katie Robinson, and supposedly she was harassed and bullied by the users. They would eventually edit the photo and keep posting it until it became the famous Jeff the Killer image. This cyberbullying eventually led to her taking her own life. This story was debunked though, and the actual girl behind the photo is still alive and has nothing to do with this rumor. This has led to many rabbit holes of people trying to find out the origin of this photo. Now I could make an entire video out of this subject, but I wouldn't be able to say more than blame it on Jorge already has. If there's a big investigation or an update, then maybe I'll consider it, but until then I'm going to leave this story here. The image is very funny in a way, but also still gives me a quick shiver. The creepypasta withstanding, this image will probably always be part of the internet's urban legends. Here's our first short creepypasta that I'll be reading in full. On March 12, 2007, on the B board of 4chan, an anonymous user posted a GIF image. At first glance, strangely the GIF image wasn't animated. It was titled I'm Happy.gif and showed what appeared to be a drawing of a smiley face, only with realistic looking eyes and a mouth. People who clicked on it saw the smiley face's smile slowly turn to a frown, and the eyes taking on an angrier appearance. The smiley face would then scream loudly, loud enough to burst eardrums, and gruesome images would flash by quickly. After about 5 minutes, it would show the text, "Have a nice day," and then the user's computer would automatically close out of the browser and would stop working, as if a virus had corrupted the hard drive. People whose computers were infected would shortly be found in their homes, skinned and mutilated, with a smiley face painted in blood on the floor next to their corpses. The founder of 4chan, Myuu, would always claim that the pictures never existed, and that the murders were unrelated. However, somewhere in the archives, the picture still exists. Most people who attempt to post it are usually swiftly banned by Myuu. This one is short but really good in my opinion. It takes a lot of the usual creepypasta tropes but doesn't use them super poorly. The images popping up of grotesque imagery is the shock value that I expect from most creepypastas, but the whole thing is so short that it doesn't really hamper the story too much. The ending with the creator of 4chan saying it never existed is probably true. It never did any of these things, but it's still a fun story. Also, I have to mention the part where everyone who saw this image just got straight up murdered, because that is a very extreme claim to make. All things considered, not a bad short pasta. Image 001 is actually more of a video creepypasta than an image creepypasta, but it does have both. Either way, it is an interesting read, and like I mentioned before, some of these creepypastas will have overlap in other genres. A college student was about to start their first year at school and needed supplies. What they ended up doing was trying to find some local who was selling a laptop, as it was the last item they needed. They almost gave up before seeing an ad for one in the newspaper. The college student drove up to a house on the edge of the woods and bought the nice Dell laptop. The man selling it was thin and wore a worn flannel jacket, but that wasn't the interesting part about him. He seemed relieved that he was able to sell his laptop, which the narrator thought was strange. A short drive later, and the narrator was back in their apartment with the laptop. They booted it up and found that the laptop actually hadn't been wiped clean like advertised. Before they can reset the laptop, they see a series of video and image files with very basic names. They click on the first video file titled 001. It starts up and shows shaky cam footage from inside of a car. A woman leaves a bar and the car slowly starts to follow behind her. This leads directly into the next video, which was titled 002. This video continues with the car following behind the woman from the first video. The next video shows the car in the parking lot of the woman's house, as we see her walk in first. There's a pause in the video before the lights in the house go off. Another person then opens the door and is seen walking towards the house. They are wearing a black hoodie and they make their way inside the house quietly. This continues until video 4, which shows the person placing something in the bed of their truck and driving off. For a split second you can see them driving up to a house, but the interesting part is the truck that's parked outside of this house looks the same as the one the seller had. Video 5 starts inside of the house, and is almost too dark to see anything. Finally, the sounds of muffled screams could be heard as the camera panned up to show the lady from before, beaten and bloody. The camera slowly zoomed in on her face before cutting out. Video 6 showed a new woman, with rubber gloves and a respirator, pouring something into a bathtub. She pulled a black garbage bag in behind her and slowly started to deposit the items into the tub. It was clearly the woman from before. The laptop was turned over to the police and the narrator was able to find out a little about what they saw. The woman that was killed was the young girlfriend of a married man. The man's wife was the one dumping the girl's body. This doesn't explain how the man that the narrator bought the laptop from got it, or why they had the same truck. Questions they hoped the police could solve. Image 001 is an interesting creepypasta for one specific reason. It feels like it could actually happen. The biggest factor is the lack of anything supernatural, but also the recording itself. Of course, I'm not sure who would record their entire crime like this. Maybe she was going to show it to her husband as some sort of act of intimidation or something. The creepypasta is fine, but that believability makes it a little more scary. I also like the ending being a little vague. The girl in the photograph is a certified classic in the world of creepypastas. Most people have probably already heard of this one, as it's likely they ran into it in many different places on the internet. It was such a short story that it was perfect for retelling or posting anywhere. I actually first found this story while reading through an app that used to send me short horror stories to read daily. This is one of the first stories I read. The actual story is pretty short, so let me read it in full. One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in class and doing math. It was 6 more minutes until after school. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned to look at the grass outside. It looked like a picture. When school's over, he ran over to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so that no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It had to be a picture of the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful and he wanted to meet her, so he ran all over the school and asked everyone if they knew her or had ever seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he was home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl, but unfortunately she also said no. It was very late, so Tom walked up the stairs, placing the picture on his bedside table and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window, so he got out of bed, walked towards his window, opened it up, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was gone. The next day, he again asked his neighbors if they knew her. Everybody said sorry, no. When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew her. She said no. He went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awakened by a tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly he got hit by a car. He was dead with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers. This is a short story that spreads perfectly because of its length. It's one that I often tell my friends who are not aware of what creepypastas are. This one was pretty popular and it still stands today. When you think of creepypasta photos, many of you probably think of the Jeff the Killer image. The image was pretty popular and it's still talked about to this day. One that many seem to gloss over are the original Slender Man photos. Slender Man actually started out as an image creepypasta. There was a contest being held on the Something Awful forums and these Slender photos were submitted by a user named Victor Surge. The images would go on to win the contest and forever cement the Slender Man into the lore of the internet. The photos also had some writings attached to them. This first one said, "We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them, but his persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." This quote added a little context to the photo, but kept the intrigue of the entity going. The second image had this quote, "One of the few recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken on the day that 14 children vanished, and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformity cited as filmed effects by officials. Fire at the library occurred 1 week later, actual photograph confiscated as evidence." This quote gives the entity its name and also establishes what it does without giving away too much. The Slender Man would go on to get video games, fanworks, a few ARGs, and generally run the internet until becoming too saturated. There's more to the downfall of Slender, but that can go in a video all by itself. If there's interest, maybe I'll cover him someday. Zalgo, or He Who Waits Behind the Wall, is an entity that I've covered completely in a prior video on my channel. The link to that is in the description. I'll give a basic rundown as he is still an image-based creepypasta at heart. Zalgo came from the mind of a user on the Something Awful forums, much like Slender and others. Zalgo's original lore had him only being able to alter images in comics. These were some of those comics. The comics show the tainting of childhood innocence and create this entity that appears to be almost eldritch in nature. Zalgo is said to have the ability to taint anything that he wishes, be it video, images, comics, or even text. Zalgo is the entity that is prophesied to end the world. "He is Zalgo and he comes" are phrases that are pretty common in the Zalgo lore. The lore may have started with images, but it changed over time. He became more of the ultimate evil that plagued the internet. Everything he touched turned to nightmare fuel. The Portraits is a very short creepypasta that is very well known in the world of internet horror. The story is only 3 paragraphs, but sets up a very creepy premise and delivers on that horror. Since this one is short, I'll again be reading it in full. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around the inside of the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the hunter awoke. He turned, blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows. Now, that is The Portraits, a pretty eerie story that is short and makes you think. Honestly, one of the best short horror stories in my opinion. The idea of a group of strangers staring at you while you're asleep in an unfamiliar place is a great horror premise. The story also doesn't over-explain itself. It gives you what you need to feel the fear and then it ends. I actually have a fear of looking out a window and seeing something staring back. I'm not sure if there's a name for that kind of fear, but I have it. Slideshow is another short pasta, let me just read it. Fingers trembling with excitement, I opened the package. Just as I had hoped, it was the camera I won on eBay. With mild delight, I realized that I had received a better deal than I had planned, because the previous owner had left the memory card in the slot. Before sending an email to the seller alerting them of the mistake, I decided to see if anything was on it. Setting the camera on slideshow, I watched as the camera displayed a picture of a shipping label. My confusion turned to horror as the next image was of a person brutally murdered. The rest of the card was alternating pictures of mailing addresses, followed by a murder scene. The last image was of the shipping label from the box I had just opened. Straight to the point and creepy, I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. There's just some creepypastas that don't leave much room for interpretation, and instead just want to tell you a spooky story. Tower of Silence is a creepypasta that I had to do some background research on. I didn't know what a dogma was, and I wasn't so familiar with the Zoroastrian religion. With that bit of research out of the way, let's get to the story. A group of Indian officials were following leads on missing person reports from a city near the deep jungle. This led them to a Tower of Silence, or dogma. The dogma was a site used to dispose of those who had passed away and was seen as a way of giving back to nature by letting birds and wild dogs eat the remains. This photograph is the only image to come from this particular incident. The weirdness goes deeper though. None of the bodies in this photo were ever identified, and the villagers who had reported missing people stated that these were not those people. Also, the usual birds and dogs were nowhere to be seen. In fact, there was no wildlife aside from flies and maggots. At the center of the tower was a pool of blood that was several feet deep. Even with the blood from every dead body there, it was still more than they'd be capable of producing. The stench that the blood gave off was enough for the officials to never want to return to this particular site. The expedition met with an unexpected end when one of the villagers accidentally kicked a small bone into the pit. The pit then exploded, sending blood and liquid flying out. Those that were covered in the blood were immediately sent to the hospital and quarantined. Those people would later go mad with fever and never recover. Officials later returned to the site with hazmat suits, but were met with an unusual sight. All of the bodies were gone and the blood pit was completely empty. The only evidence of this site's existence was this photograph. Now, this photo is pretty creepy, and if I had not done a little research, this whole site would look alien to me. Of course, with what I know now, I see this as a burial rite, and one that makes sense. The story attached is pretty creepy and is another short one that leaves you asking a lot of questions. The scariest part of this story comes with the fact that this picture looks so creepy. This picture adds a little evidence to the writing. Of course, the story itself is creepy too, with a strange, almost otherworldly anomaly being found deep in the forest of India. The mystery continues to grow and never gives up any answers, and I think that does well for the story. Our next creepypasta is called Janice.jpg. It's a pretty straightforward story about a man that explores the internet a bit too much. We've all glimpsed the weird side of the internet, but the narrator of this story made it a full-time job. Janice.jpg is a story where the narrator is actually named. His name is Mark Spielman, and he works for the police department. His job was to find illegal websites and direct them to the police. This means that he would have to sit through some of the worst the internet had to offer. After being hired for the job, he got immediately to work finding what the internet tries to hide. His first few assignments were pretty straightforward, until he came upon the website sweet15.com. With a name like that, Mark was pretty sure he'd stumble upon a child predator website. Exploring the website at first seemed promising, but it didn't seem to have a point. The first image he clicked on was titled Kathy.jpg. The picture loaded and showed a girl smiling at the camera. The girl looked to be about 15 or 16, but she looked fine and not in any precarious situation. The one thing that Mark did note as odd was that the name of the picture was now Janice.jpg. Mark clicked back to the main page and followed another link with a different girl's name. Once again, he was back on the same picture of Janice. Every picture that he clicked on led him back to that photo. He even brought in help, and all of them saw that photo over and over again. So far, there was nothing explicitly illegal about the website. It seemed like one big joke was being played on him. He couldn't find anything, and as he was leaving work for the day, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to explore the site more. Mark returned home and couldn't sleep. His mind was racing and he knew what to do. He would have to go to that site again and dig deeper than he had before. He returned to the list of names and scrolled to the bottom. At the very bottom of the list was a file named truejanice.jpg. He immediately clicked on the image and saw the same photo from before, but in black and white. Mark hovered the picture and found an embedded link. Clicking on it, his computer shut down and gave him the infamous blue screen. A few minutes of tinkering and he was able to get his computer turned back on. The computer loaded up, but every single application had been deleted from his desktop. A pop-up window said that 1,000 photos were being copied over to his main drive. The background screen of his computer was also changed to the same photo of Janice, the black and white one from before. There was a pretty big change though. Janice appeared to be frowning now, and she looked fearful. The 1,000 photos had finished downloading, and now all that was left was for him to examine them. Starting with the first image, Mark noticed immediately that they were pictures of Janice. He started flipping through them rapidly and saw that the images were changing slightly. At first she wore a smile and then it turned to the frown from before. Eventually she was full on screaming. The pictures eventually became a black screen. He clicked through them until a room appeared in the photos. At the center of the room was a bed with a bundle of something on it. Mark couldn't really be sure because it was covered by a blanket. As Mark continued clicking through the pictures, a man entered the room. He walked over to the bed and ripped the blanket from it. On the bed was a girl who had been tied down and her stomach was ripped open. The man then proceeded to operate on her while she was still alive. Mark saw picture 999 and it was a close-up of the girl. It was Janice, and the final image showed her lifeless face staring into the camera. The final picture was a question mark with the phrase, "Who is Janice?" written on it. That's the story of Janice.jpg. I'm actually a big fan of stories that utilize the medium that I think has a ton of opportunity, the internet. Stories about strange websites, mysterious links and files, and obscure forums always intrigue me. This story focuses on a website that hides some very deadly secrets. I'm not sure what the purpose of the website is, and I like that. I prefer not to know why, because it adds a sense of mystery to the story. Something I left out was the ending where the entire story was part of a police report. Mark had gone missing after the incident. It doesn't really follow up with anything after that. It just says that the police dropped the case since they had no leads. Detectives later found a code that was hidden in the Janice picture. Combining it together created a video file. The officers who investigated this lead deleted the video and refused to talk about it. I don't really like this part. Officers probably aren't just going to delete evidence, no matter what they see. Also, the police aren't just going to drop this case. There's a murder involved and one of the employees has gone missing after researching the case. The overall story is fine, but this little end piece could use a revision or two. Anomaly is a creepypasta I've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's one that I find very interesting and definitely one that should be talked about more. It was created by Rembetis and was posted on 4chan before ending up on the Creepypasta wiki. The Creepypasta starts with the narrator telling us that they're posting something they shouldn't be, and they've chosen 4chan so they can remain anonymous. He goes on to explain that he works for a printing company that mainly prints coffee table books. You know, the kind of books that you can flip through when you're bored, but never read fully. His company finally got an interesting deal worked out. An old man had contacted the company and wanted them to release a series of photos for him, ones that he considered to be very valuable. The name of the book was to be called Anomaly, and that's how he described his collection of photos. The company wasn't sure until they saw a few of the images being pitched, along with a small write-up for each one. They saw the interest and decided to go through with the deal. This would prove to be a tedious process as the old man would only send one photo at a time and wouldn't send the next until he received his previous one back. He was very protective of his collection, as he reminded them on several occasions. The narrator notes that they were about a third of the way through the book when the old man pulled out of the project. He hired a lawyer that voided his contract and threatened to sue them if they tried to publish it anyways. That's where the narrator's post comes in. He was so mad at all the lost work they did that he decided he would post 14 of the photos onto the internet and let the world see them. These are those 14 photos. The first photo shows a group of school kids. This was the last image taken of these students before they perished in a fire that took place in 1908 in Collinwood, Ohio. Not a single kid survived the fire that took the lives of 172 students, 2 teachers, and 1 rescuer. The second photo is of an entity that appears to be a woman with a very large dog. This photo was taken by a man named Charlie Noonan. He was a folklorist and was visiting Oklahoma when he was told this strange tale of this woman. After going out searching for her, he was never seen again. The photos were recovered when a man at a pawn shop got a hold of his camera and sent it to Noonan's wife. These were the last images taken on the camera. The third photo shows members of the Union Army right before the Battle of Antietam. The man on the far right lost the right side of his face as well as his arm. The image has some damage that coincides with what happened. It's not entirely known when the photo was damaged. The fourth image supposedly captures the only proof of the Axeman of New Orleans. It was taken by a French photographer and inventor who was traveling around the US at the time. The image was discovered by his daughter after he had passed away. The fifth image was taken in the Grand Caverns in southwestern Virginia. It appears to show some strange cave-dwelling cryptids. This image was taken by Orrin Jeffries as he was trying to see if there was any way to take photos in total darkness. After leaving his camera in the cave, he swore he saw something and ran away until he was out of the cave. A few days later, he and a friend returned for the camera and found this image on it. In 1938, the sixth photo was taken after a car crash. A mother and her twins were in the crash, but only the mother survived. This photo was taken by a policeman at the scene, and it appears that the twins wanted to watch what happened next. The seventh photo shows a group of kids and their donkey. This was the last image of these kids taken before the accident. The 3 kids had fallen asleep in their family barn right before their father drove in with the hay sweep and dismembered the kids exactly where the damage on the photograph was. Photo 8 shows a ghost showing up to watch her murderer be hanged. He was a drifter who came into town and murdered her. He was later hanged by the townsfolk. Photo 9 was of a woman who got lost in an intricate underground tunnel system of an asylum. This asylum was famously known to be the one that inspired H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham Sanatorium and also for inspiring Batman's Arkham Asylum. One of the patients, a woman named Sarah Eustace, wandered into the underground tunnels and was never seen again. A nurse at the asylum would go down into the tunnels when she was off shift and try to find the missing woman, but was never successful. This picture was taken on one of her expeditions. The 10th photo shows a family photo where a deceased relative decided to join. He was the uncle that was known for playing jokes on everyone. This was his last joke. In 1935, a woman by the name of Josephine Yerno went missing while on one of her nightly strolls. Search parties turned up nothing, but 3 years later she would be found squatting in front of one of the neighbors' homes. She appeared to be completely alright and had no idea that she'd been missing. To her, no time had passed. She refused medical attention and even continued her walks. This photo was taken of her on one of her walks. 5 years after her initial disappearance, she would disappear again, but this time for good. No one knows what happened to her, and this photo paints a very eerie feeling to the whole situation. The 12th photo depicts a mill. This mill was infamous for its child labor and actually caused child labor laws to be enacted. A 9-year-old girl would lose her life at the mill. This photo was taken, and a tall white figure can be seen in the corner window, but is not reflected in the lake below. Photo 13 shows a girl named Lily Palmer as she's about to go trick-or-treating with her nanny. This was the same year that she tried to claw out her eyes, and she reported seeing things crawling in her eyes. The girl was later hospitalized for her condition after she tried to poke out her eyes with sewing needles. This photo supposedly depicts the first signs of her illness. The final image shows a cropped version of a nuclear bomb test from 1945. The uncropped version seems to show a UFO. This image has only been seen by a select few and is likely the only copy left. That was Anomaly, and I really like the creepypasta. It gives a believable intro and then follows up with images that add to the story. These images could easily be from anywhere, just taken from the internet with their issues, but having the stories included with each one makes it interesting. I like creepypastas that include media like this. I also really enjoy each image having its own unique and creepy backstory. It makes it feel like each image is its own story, which is kind of the point, I guess. This creepypasta is definitely one worth checking out if you haven't already. The painting is our next creepypasta. This creepypasta is written by Meek and can be found on creepypasta.com. There are actually 2 stories with this name, or at least that I could find. The name is pretty simple, so it's likely there are countless stories that bear the same name. The narrator starts the story by telling us about his brother that had gone missing, or more accurately, how his brother had been kidnapped. The kidnapper was described as being methodical and professional, as no fingerprints or signs of break-in were found that night. The narrator, though, knows the truth. It all started when his dad found a painting in the attic of their home. The painting was of a tall gray house surrounded by grass. Behind the house was a sudden drop down to the ocean. It was built on a cliff's edge. There were words written on the back of the painting that the narrator's mom recognized as Welsh, but didn't translate. The narrator didn't like the painting, but his dad loved it. The painting was then placed in the boys' room. The narrator wakes up one night at 2 a.m., feeling hot and sweaty. He sees that his brother Jamie is still asleep. He tiptoes out of the bedroom and gets some water from the sink. Feeling refreshed, he returns to bed. That's when he notices a strange black shape on the painting. The black shape resembles a man, but he didn't remember seeing him before. The next day it was gone. No one had believed him, and he didn't really believe himself. That night, though, he saw the man again. This time he was double the size and in a different position. The narrator covered his head with his blanket and went to sleep shaking. The next night the author woke again at 2 a.m. and saw that the painting was completely black. He tried to not make a move and be as still as possible. Fear overcame him though, and he got out of bed and crept towards the bedroom door. He opened it and then ran towards the bathroom. The narrator locked the door and hid in the tub. For a few moments, there was no sound, until the creaks of the floorboards could be heard. He stayed quiet for a moment as he heard someone walk up to the bathroom door. He called out asking if it was his brother, his mom, or his dad. Only sound that he heard in return was the scratching on the wood. This lasted for a few moments before he could hear whatever it was walking away. He awoke the next morning to the sound of banging on the door. It was his dad, and he was calling for the 2 boys. When only one emerged, they called the police. On the door of the bathroom were deep gash marks. To this day, his brother has never been found, and the narrator is sure he was taken by the entity from the painting. The painting itself looked different now. There was a small child that was sitting inside the house, and he appeared to be crying. The boy looked suspiciously like his brother, but no one would believe him. The narrator, now an adult, still has the painting. He keeps it in the attic, and every once in a while he'll hear footsteps from up there. He calls out his brother's name every time. Not once has there been a response. The image attached to this creepypasta is The Crying Boy by Bruno Amadio. This image is correlated with this creepypasta, but the picture itself has its own story to tell, likely one that I'll get to at a later part of this iceberg. The painting is a great short story to tell around a campfire. It has that easy retellability that a lot of these earlier creepypastas had. The story was circulating the internet in 2014. It's a very fun story and definitely one I bring out around Halloween for my non-creepypasta friends. The last creepypasta on this tier is Satellite Images. It was written by user Squid Ink and posted to the Creepypasta wiki in 2013. It follows a person who can't leave their apartment due to a car accident that left them in a wheelchair. Due to this, they spend most of their time traveling the world using Google Earth. This was usually done by picking a random city and then dropping in on a random street. Watching the people go about their lives always made the narrator feel better. While moving around the streets of Tokyo, they saw a woman with red shoes. Her shoes stuck out because they had the same ones. For a moment, they felt like they had connected with a random Google Earth stranger. That moment lapsed as they decided it was time for bed. The next morning, they decided they would visit Paris. Grabbing the Google character icon, they dropped them onto the street view. The city of Paris was one of their favorites to see. That was until they saw the same woman again with the red shoes. This had to be some cosmically insane coincidence. Leaving Paris, they decided to go to Berlin, and once again she was there. She appeared to be getting closer to the camera each time she was seen. Her face was also turning more and more towards the narrator. Another city and she was there again. No matter which city the narrator went to, the lady with red shoes was around. She also continued to get closer with each sighting. The narrator switched to their city and once again the girl was there. This time she was looking directly at them. They thought it had to be a joke Google was playing. They switched to the camera outside of their apartment complex and saw no one. With a relieved sigh, the narrator logged off of Google Maps. They were ready to never use it again when a knock was heard at their door. The narrator had a camera installed to see who their visitors might be. When they flipped to the camera, they saw the woman with red shoes staring directly at them. Her face was still blurred as if on Google Maps. This is kind of a classic story in the world of creepypastas. I've heard this one a multitude of times by many different narrators. I actually enjoyed the story a lot. The story is excellent at setting up its premise of a person who can't travel the world and finds another way. This of course leads to the lady in red shoes tracking them down. The ending is purposefully vague, and I think it does well for the story. I also really like the use of Google Maps as a story element. People using websites that we all know about is an easy way to connect with your audience. The description of the blurry-faced woman staring into the camera at the end was the perfect way to end the story as well. It's foreboding and creepy, so perfect for an internet horror story. The image that's often used for this creepypasta is one from Google Maps. There are a ton of images on Google Maps that are bizarre, creepy, disturbing, and unexplainable. I'll be talking about those images later in the iceberg, so don't worry. We'll discuss this one too. And that ends part 1 of the Cursed Creepypasta Image Iceberg Explained. Once again, I'm finding so many new stories in the world of creepypasta, and I'm so happy that you all enjoy watching these videos. Without all that support from the community, I wouldn't be able to do this. A quick shout out to my top tier patrons, Blow-Nose and Nora Kingsley. You two help this channel more than you know. If anyone else wants to donate to my Patreon, it's in the description below. I post videos there early, new video ideas, polls, scripts, and behind the scenes stuff. If any of that interests you, then you know where to go. Thank you to everyone who watches my content. I really couldn't continue without you. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your night. I hope to see you all back here for part 2.